The silent treatment is a reasonable way to handle conflict. You're wrong if you think it's automatically abuse. Smart, empathetic people believe that withdrawing is a necessary tool for self-preservation, while others are convinced it's a covert act of psychological warfare. Both sides have a point, and the consequences of getting it wrong can shatter a relationship. Where do you really stand? By the end of this, you might not be so sure. Let's build the case for needing space. An argument gets heated, voices rise, words become sharper, aimed to wound. In that moment, your nervous system is flooded. Your ability to think rationally plummets as survival instincts take over. Continuing the conversation at this point guarantees more damage. You will say things you cannot take back. You will hear things that will echo for weeks. The most responsible move is to stop, to step away, to create a space where the emotional storm can pass. This is emotional regulation. It is a sign of maturity to recognize your own limits and refuse to engage when you are compromised. A strategic retreat allows both people to cool down, regain perspective, and return to the issue with a clearer head. A person withdrawing isn't trying to punish their partner. They're trying to save the relationship from the immediate destructive impulses of their own overwhelmed brain. The silence is a shield, protecting both of you from friendly fire. That sounds convincing. Responsible even. But there's a problem. A fire break is a planned temporary gap. A wall of ice that appears without warning and has no scheduled thaw is an entirely different structure. What happens when needing space turns from 1 hour into 3 days? What happens when there's no communication about when the silence will end? The person on the receiving end isn't experiencing a healthy pause. They are experiencing a void, a sudden, inexplicable amputation of connection. Their reality shifts from a shared world to solitary confinement. The silence stops being a shield and starts feeling like a weapon, a very effective one. This is where the argument shifts from self-preservation to psychological warfare. To the human brain, ostracism is a mortal threat. Neuroimaging studies show that the anterior cingulate cortex, the brain region that processes physical pain, lights up intensely during social rejection. That feeling of being ignored isn't just in your head. Your brain is screaming that you have been cast out from the tribe, a sentence that once meant certain death. The silent treatment weaponizes this primal fear. It deliberately inflicts pain by withholding the most fundamental human need after food and shelter: connection. The person initiating the silence holds all the power. They become the judge, the jury, and the sole arbiter of when your sentence is over. The person being ignored is left in a state of agonizing uncertainty. They replay every conversation, they scrutinize every action, desperately searching for the mistake that triggered their exile. This is a perfect environment for anxiety to metastasize. To end the torment, the punished person will often do anything. They will apologize for things they didn't do. They will concede on issues they care about. They will abandon their own needs entirely, just to make the silence stop. The goal of the silent treatment in this light is control. It is a passive-aggressive maneuver to win a conflict by making the other person's reality so painful that they surrender unconditionally. It bypasses reason and negotiation, attacking the very foundation of the other person's emotional stability. And yet, is it fair to demand someone communicate when they feel emotionally shattered? Forcing a person to speak when they are overwhelmed is its own form of violation. It denies their internal reality. It insists that your need for reassurance is more important than their need for safety. For someone who grew up in a household where conflict always escalated into screaming or violence, silence may be the only coping mechanism they have. It's a clumsy, maladaptive tool, but it's the only one in their toolbox. They aren't thinking like a general plotting a psychological campaign. They're acting like a cornered animal, pulling into their shell because it's the only way they know to feel safe. To demand they emerge and talk it out is to demand they walk back into a fire they believe will consume them. They may lack the emotional vocabulary to say, "I am overwhelmed and I need a break." The silence is their only way of communicating that need. So who is the aggressor here? The person who withdraws to protect themselves, or the person who beats on the door of their silence, demanding they come out and face the conflict they are desperately trying to escape? The truth, as usual, is more complicated. The crucial distinction lies in a single variable: communication. A healthy timeout is negotiated, or at least announced. It has boundaries. I am too angry to talk right now. I'm going for a walk for an hour. "We can talk when I get back." This statement acknowledges the conflict, respects the other person, and provides a timeline. It creates a container for the negative emotion, assuring both parties that the connection is strained but not broken. The relationship is still safe. The silent treatment, or what researchers at the Gottman Institute call stonewalling, has none of these features. It is a unilateral withdrawal. A wall goes up without explanation. There is no timeline. There is no reassurance. Stonewalling is one of the 4 key behaviors that predict divorce with over 90% accuracy. It functions like a poison, slowly eroding the trust and safety that a relationship is built on. Each instance leaves a residue of resentment and anxiety. The recipient learns that connection is conditional and can be revoked at any time, without warning. They start to walk on eggshells, suppressing their own feelings and needs to avoid triggering another withdrawal. The relationship becomes a minefield. Even if the stonewaller's intent is simply to avoid conflict, the impact is catastrophic. The silence says more than words ever could. It says, "You are not worth talking to. Your feelings do not matter. The connection between us is so fragile that I must sever it to protect myself." The person who uses silence as a tool trains their partner. They teach them that certain topics are off limits. They teach them that disagreement will result in punishment by abandonment. This is how vibrant, dynamic relationships wither into hollow arrangements of conflict avoidance. The core issue is never resolved. It's just buried under a fresh layer of silent resentment, waiting to erupt later with even greater force. The person wielding the silence may even feel a sense of righteous self-control. They see themselves as the one who refused to stoop to yelling or insults. They frame their withdrawal as taking the high road. They fail to see the invisible violence of their actions. They don't see the anxiety they are causing, the trust they are eroding, the slow and steady destruction of their partner's sense of security. They are so focused on managing their own discomfort that they become blind to the pain they are inflicting. The silence allows them to win the battle without ever having to fight. They simply wait for the other side to surrender to the psychological exhaustion. It's a victory that costs them their kingdom. So where do you draw the line? At what point does a legitimate need for space become a destructive act of punishment? Is it after an hour? A day? A week? Who gets to decide when a pause has curdled into a weapon? And the harder question, which side of that line have you been on, perhaps without even realizing it?